All right, welcome back to the E-Town Public Radio Podcast Show. Damn it, I got the name wrong again, and I'll workshop it. I'll workshop something later. This is a bit that someone's laughing at. Anyways, welcome back to the E-Town Podcast, or as it's going to be called forward, E-Town Public Radio. We're here with Tim Eldred again for part 2. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing okay. I just got in from a run, so my voice may be a little rough, but let's do it.
All right. So, how's everyone? So, let's before we jump into it, let's of course do a little check-in. How was our weeks?
Fine.
Come on. Anything happen? Come on.
I got excited for another podcast.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I had a big step forward into adulthood this past Friday.
Hey, that's none of our business.
Hush. No, I'm just joking. No, I had my first job interview.
Okay.
Wow.
Yay! It was for a... Yes, thank you. It was for a dishwasher's spot at the Cheesecake Factory. Obviously, this isn't something to write home about, but, you know, this is my first job. This is my first interview after sending out, I think, 50 applications to places around here. It went well. I clicked with the interviewer. We pretty much got along. I was everything they were looking for, but unfortunately, I don't see myself getting a job because transportation is an issue. I'd have to commute, and they want me to do a night shift, and basically, I can't get around if there's no buses or nothing because I don't have a lot of friends I can call upon, let alone people who would be awake at 12 midnight willing to drive a town over to come and get me. So, but I can say I had an interview and that we're on the road to something at least, maybe. So, you know,
Good start.
baby steps. Yeah, exactly. So that was basically my week.
I'm in a similar boat, except that I have not started interviews yet. However, in this past week, I wrapped production on the 12th and final episode of Magic the Gathering Season 1.
Nice.
Which is going to be on Netflix either summer or fall of 2022.
Oh, shit. Wait. Should we NDA this? Like, should I bleep this out when I eventually put this on YouTube?
No, we couldn't talk about what we're doing. I
Okay,
can't give
fair
you any
enough.
content information, but
Yeah.
the
Just wanted
existence
to
of
play
the
it
show
safe.
is public knowledge now, so that's fine.
All right, just playing safe. Although I will have do that thing that other podcasts do where it's like, the values and representation of this podcast do not necessarily represent those, blah, 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 blah.
Man, don't make me say that. You say that.
Yeah, I'll probably do that just to sandbag you a little. But, yeah.
Well, I can tell you that it's an extremely complex show, one of the hardest I've ever worked on. It's extremely dense with content and detail and world building, just like the game. And I think it's going to be something special. I think it's going to be next year's Arcane. I said it here first.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, we'll see. I'll certainly give it a look when it drops.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so shall we get on to business?
Lead the way.
All right, last time on the podcast, 8 hogged the whole fucking thing because he wouldn't shut up about Voltoms. No,
I can respect that.
No, we just did about... we were just talking... Well, you guys were mostly talking about Voltoms and the fandom and how it was to be a fan of something so, well, relatively speaking, obscure at the time in the States and how that all sort of coalesced. But this week, we're going to talk about some of your more original works.
All right.
And a little bit of Extreme Ghostbusters.
And
Sure.
also things that things that might be taking cues from Botoms, like Chaser Platoon.
Hey, keep it in line, mister. I want to have some roles this week. I want royalties.
All right.
But we can probably still talk. But y'all can at least you can still probably ask about it, though. And I'll try and chime up a jokey joke or whatever.
So where do you want to go? Where do you want to begin? Pittsburgh? Grease Monkey?
Yes, I would like to start with Grease Monkey.
Okay. Well, that's a comic book that I made back in the early 90s, and it's continued on for 2 books and 2 homemade animated films. Mm-hmm. And there's more in me. It'll come out eventually. What would you like to know?
Hey, how about you start us off?
Oh, okay. Fine then. In that case. All right. So Chaser Platoon is something that you've mentioned before is like Votoms, right?
He did it again.
Hang on. You'll see where I'm going with this. Calm down.
Yeah, I know,
right?
I know.
So from Chaser Platoon...
It's more than that. Chaser Platoon started out as Votom's fanfic.
Okay. All right.
Oh, so it's like the Twilight of it. No, not the Twilight. The 30 Shades of Grey of its day.
Oh,
yes,
God.
exactly.
All right, so I'll put that on the side. So if that's where I could pin Votoms for something you like and you made a comic book about, is Grease Monkey kind of like a coalesce of things like Robotech and Space Battleship Yamato?
Yes and no. Every project that I've come up with has roots in something else.
Okay. A little bit of something.
Because you're a product of the things you absorb. And naturally, the stuff you create is going to reflect that. It's going to be influenced by that. There's the adage about no man is an island, and this is exactly what that means. Because when you read comics and you see films and TV shows and read books and all that cool stuff. It's going to have an impact on you. If you're a creative person, you're going to be processing that information at some level in your head for the rest of your life. And if you write stories yourself, you're going to write about the things that impact you, and you're going to find ways to do it that may echo something from a different author whose work has influenced you. It's been that way for all of human history. Nothing exists in a vacuum. It all comes from something else. In the case of Chaser Platoon, it started out as a Votom's fanfic comic that I just wanted to make for myself because I was crazy about the show. Felt like I wanted to create a story in that world. So I started writing one as a comic and put it away when other things came along. But then I got it back out again when I needed to come up with something to pitch to a publisher. And I thought, well, why don't I just take this story, which is pretty cool, and change the look of it, change the names, and turn it into something original. And that's exactly how Heavy Gear was created not very long afterward.
Oh, I was going to ask, is Chaser Platoon after you made the Votom's viewing guide?
Yes, I think they were kind of in lockstep with each other. I can't remember exactly when I started one or the other, but I'm sure that they were in my head at the same time. And, as I was processing Votom's information, I was learning more about the world, and so that allowed me to create a story that was a little more authentic. And so, in about 1991 or 92, I brought the idea to Eternity Comics, which I was working for as a freelancer, and the editor liked it, and so it came out in a 6-issue story, and it was called Chaser Platoon, and it was the only original comic book I ever got published from beginning to end. It's the only one that did not get canceled before it finished.
You mean, okay, I was going to mention, because there's another comic book I'm aware of that I'm slowly reading through. I haven't read Chaser Platoon yet, but I'm slowly reading through another one that you've worked on, that you've briefly mentioned it in the last episode, called Broid.
Uh-huh.
Is that what you mean when you refer to a comic book that you can... is that one of the first projects you worked on where you kind of ran into problems like that?
Yeah, that was my first original comic book for anybody. It came out from Eternity in 1990, 91, and every single issue of it is now up at my website, timeldred.com. So you can read all of the issues that got published and the ones that did not.
Okay.
And it saves you a lot of digging through, quarter bins at comic shops.
Fair enough. All right. So what's the difference between what's the dividing line for Chaser Platoon and Broid?
Broid came first in terms of, well, no, it didn't. Because now that I've revealed that Chaser Platoon started as a Votom story, I have to say that one went first, but I put it aside. And a few years later, I was, again, processing a lot of anime that I liked. And the two shows that were top of my mind at that time were SBT Leisner and Fist of the North Star.
Yeah. Which is funny considering the second half of that show.
Uh-huh. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to find a way to like channel that energy into something of my own? And so I came up with this future post-apocalypse story with a giant robot in it. And just went hog wild for a good couple of years, just writing it for myself, writing and roughing it out. And then when I approached Eternity, I had all the issues like ready to pencil. They were all in rough form. So anybody who wanted to see what the comic was could just read my roughs. And unfortunately, that was a really rough time for the market, speaking of the word rough. And we debuted it in, I think it was 90, and it did not do very well in its opening gambit. And once you come in under the wire in terms of the sales that you need in comics, you're pretty much guaranteed to stay there. Very few of them break that curse. And, fate did its fate thing, and I got 8 issues in, and they finally said, no, we can't afford to do anymore. So the last chunk of it never got professionally published, but it's now up at my website, so you can see it there.
Good.
And because it got canceled early, that's why I had to come up with a new idea to replace it, because, I needed some income. And so I pulled the Votum story out of my personal vault, and that became my next project.
So there's something interesting here. When you go ahead and when you pitched these stories, and they saw how, I remember you mentioned something on your article, like having a pitch ready at the front, having a pitch ready with as much material as humanly possible is the best way to make sure that you can get something going between you and a publisher, right?
Well, it shows that you're committed and that you're actually capable of doing the work. Mm-hmm. The number one question they're going to have when they look at a portfolio is not can you draw, but can you draw a comic book every month? That's a big dividing line. If you've never done it before, they don't know if they can trust you to do it. So you've got to at least prove that you know the volume of work that's going to be expected of you. If you're going to draw a comic every month, between 25 and 30 pages. So if you can walk in with physical proof that you're capable of doing that, obviously you're going to get more attention. And that worked well for me. I had been drawing comics since I was 12 years old, before I even started pitching them. So having built up the discipline and the experience was a gigantic benefit.
Were you, when you're doing early on, like in your teens, were you even consciously aware that that's what you were doing after past a certain point, or did that just come later?
Well, I always had the idea in the back of my mind that eventually I'd look to do this for a living, but the work is its own reward when you're unemployed and drawing your own comics. You're just doing it. Yeah, you're doing it because you love doing it. If you don't love doing it, it's going to burn you out.
Speaking from personal experience, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. You really gotta be. I find that stuttering really hard today. I find that if I'm just not feeling something, it probably is for the best to just drop in and find something else that clicks.
Or put it on a shelf for a while and come back to it.
Because
I'm having that experience right now. I'm developing
that.
a new webcomic that I want to start working on next year. This is an idea that I pitched to Eternity back in the early 90s, around that same time. And they didn't go for it then. They didn't think there was enough of a story there. And I had to kind of give up on it. But I always personally liked it. And so I put it back in my files, and every once in a while I'd get it out again and think, boy, I should really start developing this again. And I started doing that for real maybe about a year and a half ago. And now I can't wait. It's going to be much, much better than it would have been if I had gotten permission to start doing it back then.
Sounds good.
Not to mention... No,
I was going to say sounds good to me.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. So I was going to say, especially nowadays where webcomics are pretty common, and now you probably have more freedom than you would have if you were working on
absolutely.
people, right?
There are no gatekeepers in the webcomic world. I mean, as long as you're willing to do the work and not necessarily turn a profit, you get yourself out of that whole chain of approvals where you have to take an idea to someone else so they can come up with the money to pay you to turn it into something real. My goal, once I started hitting my head against that comic book wall with one series after another getting canceled, my goal became, all right, I'm going to find something else to make a living on so that I can do these comics that I want to do and not constantly run into this problem. And so that became kind of the guiding rule book for my life from then on. And the key to it was getting into TV animation because that paid the bills really well and it freed up all my free time, my personal time, so that I could spend it on what I wanted to and not having to worry about selling it.
Okay, so then I have to ask, that knowledge you gain from the industry, then I want to say, would you say you just start injecting that into where we are when we talk about Grease Monkey?
Grease Monkey was a kind of a rebellion against the comics that I was seeing back during those years.
Right.
It was the Image phase of comics where they were all dark and angry and
it's all about
with, gritted teeth and tensed muscles. And,
Todd McFarlane
guns and all that.
Look,
that one ugly fucking baby.
Look,
Eight knows what I'm talking about. In fact, Eight, why don't you show him what I'm talking about?
I like the first 100 issues of Spawn and then some.
Yes, I know that, but let's see the funny thing. Let's not beat around the bush.
All right. I was gonna say,
this
guy. But looking back at those as I was reading them, I perfectly understand what you're talking about, because for a while I would only understand like from a distance because I never actually bothered to read them. But then actually going through it, well, yeah, there's a good number of them from that era. They're pretty good. That are gritted teeth, pouches that have no purpose, big ass guns. But there's just a lot of it that got kind of turned into garbage real fast. So I could see how that gave you a certain energy to want to just say to hell with all that.
Oh, right.
Well, what was happening during that time was not limited to Image. Image was just the symbol of it. It was a time when a whole generation of artists who had grown up reading comics were now in charge of drawing comics. Mm-hmm. And so all they had to bring to it, this goes back to what I was talking about before, the things you absorb come out through you creatively. If all you have absorbed is comics, then that's all that's going to inform your creativity. And you're just going to end up doing echoes of things we've already seen. And that was rampant in the 90s in the comic book world. And it was mainly, I think, just because of the generational shift. Most of the people who were very well known at that time grew up only on comics. They didn't have a whole lot of other things informing them. So when I did Grease Monkey, it was a kind of a rejection of that, because I brought into it a lot of things that informed me within comics and outside of comics. And I wanted it to be a general audience title as opposed to these very narrowly targeted superhero comics that were just commanding the marketplace. I thought we really needed something else, or the readership is just going to get smaller and smaller. So Grease Monkey was my attempt to create something for everybody. Now it exists primarily on my website, greasemonkeybook.com, which you can reach through timeldred.com. And it's a science fiction comedy featuring humans and gorillas working together in outer space.
Has anything in like people you've met or anything influenced any of your characters or whatnot? Because when I look at Mac, I get big, fun uncle energies, and I'm kind of reminded of my own uncle. He's kind of got that fun vibe. Hell yeah, let's do it our way, buddy. Kind of energy going.
Yeah, he's not based on a specific person, but a type of person that you always wish you had in your life. Somebody who's already been through the phases that you're about to go through and is sympathetic to you and is there to help you and kind of guide you through it as a shaman, rather than one of those typical adults who's just going to say, "Get over it, kid." So he's a gorilla, and he's tough on the outside, but he's a marshmallow on the inside.
The best character type.
And what I kind of realized as I got older is that, he was who I wanted to be when I got older. Because some aspects of me now are like him, back when I first invented him. So he's aspirational in that way.
Yeah.
So was he always meant to? Actually, no. I could. Let's try to avoid things that you've already put on your website with the articles, where you go ahead and break it down. Let's see. I guess where I could start from is it's really hard to do that without repeating that, because we ended up doing that sometimes on the last episode, with other things that weren't just like your work. I guess,
don't worry about it.
All right. Well, if you insist.
It's all part of the story.
All right. Well, when you put it that way. So, were you always intending for an animated sequence to follow up any events for the comic?
Yes, a Grease Monkey OVA.
Or is that just something that came together because you had the resources at the time?
When you are writing and drawing comics over months and years at a time, you cannot help but imagine what it would look like someday on TV or a movie screen. That's just built in, because that channel exists. And as soon as you create something, you just naturally think, oh, here's the actor who I'd cast in this role. And then that helps kind of guide your thinking on how to, present that character. Or more on a more technical level, you think about how would these two characters sound if they were actors talking to each other, and that kind of gives you a different framework to write from. Because if you think you're writing for people who are actually going to say words like on a movie set, that may guide you to choose different words than if you're just writing something you only expect to be read.
Can you pull something from even, say, book 1, for example, for as something you could cite as that's probably where I could say that applies.
Well, with right from the beginning on Grease Monkey, I made it my policy to read my own lines to myself out loud, to see how they sounded coming from somebody. And that also helped me to avoid clumsy phrasing or phrasing that you would use in text rather than in speech, because they can be two different animals. They can be structured differently. When you have text on a page, the words are there constantly kind of reinforcing each other in a visual sense. But if they are being spoken, then you're only hearing them one by one, and so they're going to build an idea a little differently. And so that can make a big difference when you are writing dialogue for two characters talking to each other. If you want it to sound like real dialogue spoken by real people, and therefore authentic and engaging, taking it through that process almost like a table read is a perfect way to refine it.
That's a pretty good way. That's a pretty cool way of putting it. So, I guess there's something that's going through my mind when I look at the way the story works as as a comic book and then as an animated feature. If it did have an animated feature, if it was ever like a TV show, I was thinking about all the little details that would either be reworked to fit something for television, or things that would stay. But is there ever anything you look at when you see it where you're like, based on how you know how television works, or putting things on into animated form works, where you look at that and you look at a piece of Grease Monkey and you go like, that's probably getting changed, or that probably won't get changed?
I think it all depends on who the audience is eventually going to be.
Okay, yeah, all right.
If it's for an adult audience, I don't think a whole lot would have to change. You might want to put some edges on it. You might want to up the risks, make some scenes a little more threatening or dangerous. If it's for little kids, you're going to shave those edges off, because you don't want to fill it up with ideas that are not appropriate for a child's mind yet.
Okay, yeah. I was the first thing.
Yeah, save the dark thoughts from under 10.
I thought the first thing that popped into my mind is Mac and his like. Actually, no. I was gonna say that his like his crush on the commander is probably not probably wouldn't be too bad. That just depends on what exactly he's doing when he's thinking of it, I would imagine.
Yeah.
He definitely wouldn't drop the gorilla in the mist joke.
When it comes to like violence in that story, I'd imagine it's one of those things where like it wouldn't be like too surprising if they changed certain things, but even in like the animated pilot, like no one bleeds in that, no one like explodes in like excruciatingly gory detail. It's just not that kind of story, right?
Yeah. There are two different kind of aspects to the story. There's the ship side and the space battle side. So you're either in one mode or the other. When you're in space battles, there's going to be some action, of course. I don't know if you could call it violence because it's machine on machine, but I guess it depends on how the violence impacts individual characters, or how the action impacts them, rather. And when you're on board the ship in that story, you're kind of in a political environment where you're dealing with management, and you have to navigate the maze of life in both a civilian and a military environment that are kind of fused together in uncomfortable ways. And you need somebody who's really clever to help you navigate through that. And that's why we have Mac as the guide and shaman, and we have his sidekick Robin as the audience character who has to figure out all this stuff. And of course, he's going to need some help from a grease monkey. And that's where the story, or that's where the title kind of develops a different meaning, because a grease monkey is a mechanic, of course, but this particular grease monkey kind of greases the wheels of life to help you get through it, to help you survive it.
I was going to say, it's funny you mentioned... Oh, go ahead. Go.
Well, I was just going to say, concluding that the story isn't really built for hand-to-hand violence of any kind.
Okay.
Because I wanted it to be more cerebral, and I wanted it to be more emotionally and psychologically challenging. But the minute I started pitching it for animation back in the mid-90s, there was immediate pressure to increase the violence and actually have physical altercations in it.
That doesn't surprise me.
Wow.
And it
that
felt
sounds
wrong.
So backwards nowadays.
Yeah, it felt really wrong. But at the time, TV cartoons were aimed at kids, and they had to be supported by toys. And as soon as you decide what kind of toys you're going to make, there's going to be an action element, and you picture kids, having play fights with their toys. And so, since that didn't really exist in the comic, evolving it for TV at that point would have involved adding more physical action, and maybe not violence per se, but implied violence or suggested violence. And I think it would have been disappointing had it gone forward at that point.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to pitch it today. I think the animation environment is much more accommodating. And we're seeing many more things now happen in the streaming era. We're no longer reliant on commercial TV and toy products to create funding. I think we may have talked about this a little bit last time. Streaming channels or streaming companies are selling subscriptions now. And so content is king again and not merchandising, which I think is very healthy.
So I got a quick question. If you can tell us this, where are some places that you have pitched a pilot to? If this is something you can talk about.
It's not me doing the pitching this time. I signed on with a development company about a year ago called Open Gate, and they have been pitching it on my behalf. So, but they're kind of quiet until they actually have some interest. They don't really communicate much to me. But about two weeks ago, I think they said that Canadian companies is showing some interest. So we'll see where that goes. You never know where these are going to come from.
You heard it here first, folks. Grease Monkeys coming to YTV. Sorry, I had to get that out.
Yeah, there's so many partnerships that happen now between production companies and streaming companies. It could come from anywhere.
Regardless, no matter what, the best of luck to that for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah, for real. The Grease Monkey pilots were the first things H showed me. I was like, fuck, I'm so into this. I'm so bummed that I wasn't around to support this when it first came out.
Well, I don't know that it really came out in terms of animation.
The comic itself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, the comic came out in several different editions in the 90s. They didn't really catch fire, once again, because of, history. But when I just dug in anyway and decided to finish drawing the whole first graphic novel, that led to a repeat of my initial comic book experience where I had the whole thing done. And then I found an agent to pitch it around, and he landed a publishing deal with Tor, and they put it out in hardcover.
Good. Well, all right. That's pretty good. I was gonna say, do you know of fans internationally that in other languages that speak other languages that have come across Grease Monkey?
The only one that I know for sure is a friend of mine in Russia who who decided one day, hey, I want to pull together a whole bunch of different comics from people I like and create an anthology book. And so she asked me for a chapter of Grease Monkey, and I said, sure. And it got translated into Russian and published in her book. And I'll grab a copy right now.
Nice.
Ooh, sweet. Let's see this thing.
What chapter was it?
Grease Monkey in Cyrillic.
It's called Retro Cosmo Comic.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
If you can see that. Yeah, it's this interesting paperback with it's like about 7 different contributors, including me. And of course, I can't read any of them, but right here, there's Grease Monkey.
Black and white.
Hey, I was looking at that just a few minutes ago, just refreshing.
And there's some Cyrillic.
You can kind of make it out.
I can see the backwards R's. It's fine.
Yeah, there's a story title. If that
was one of my favorite chapters.
Yeah, I love 3ob. His power's 10.
Okay, so you mentioned how like navigating through that through the political storm that exists on the ship, the Fist of Earth, is meant to be like kind of scary, uncomfortable. You know, you have someone like Mac to get you through it in order to be able to survive and stand a chance. But you know, it's ironic because when I'm reading it, I actually find it far more like I can feel the atmosphere. I can feel these different aspects coming together that makes it feel like really dangerous. Like at any moment, this could
Like
just
coldness.
This could all just go really badly for Barbarian Squadron and the boys. But it still feels like it doesn't feel overbearing in the way I could feel it for like a drama of the same kind for something else, like maybe a live action series or what have you. And I can't quite put my finger on why that is.
Well, because I wanted it to also be a comedy.
Well, I suppose so. Well, you know, it's funny you mention that, but like even when there's nothing like really funny happening, I can still feel it, and it won't feel that bad. Like even though I know there's gonna be a laugh at some point, in the moment it doesn't feel like that, and I'll just.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's because the stakes aren't life and death. They're, you know, on a good day, the stakes are about just not embarrassing yourself. Yeah. On a bad day, the stakes are, I don't want to lose my job. But your life is never in danger. It's more like reality that way.
It's just the little things.
Yeah. I mean, when I went into this as a future science fiction story in space, of course, the option was just go right to battle scenes and stuff. But that was less interesting to me than making it a character ensemble piece.
So,
where all these characters had their own personalities and goals, and they would react to each other in different ways. You know, kind of like throw them all into a tin can and stir it up and see what happens.
So there was never going to be a Robotech scene with like getting up out of the hospital bed and like Roy's dead. He's gone. He drops the toy plane and it crashes, and you're like, oh, nothing like that was ever going to happen, right?
Until you get to book 2.
All right.
So that's where it really hits the fan, eh?
Yes. Book 2 I did after book 1 was published by Tor. And they, for one reason or another, just weren't very communicative at that point. So instead of waiting for them to come around and put it on paper, I just said, screw it, I'm going to put it online again. And that became my first webcomic.
Okay.
Yeah. And the whole thing is available at the website, so you can read that. And that project originally started as a screenplay, because when I was pitching it for animation, I thought, why don't I take the next step and write it as a movie?
Yeah.
And at some point I realized, you know, an animated movie based on this has very little probability of getting made. So I'll just take my script and turn it into a comic, and then I will have done it justice on my own, no matter what happens later.
All right.
So was some of this script used for the pilots then?
Yes. When you see the very first Grease Monkey animated movie that I did, it's based on the first act of the script.
Okay.
Already got a head start.
So,
yeah.
When it comes to... this is where I think we should bring in something with regards to continuity. When you write these stories out, especially for something like Grease Monkey, what's the framework you're kind of working with, so that way you make sure things are well within your means, and you don't make a mistake that's too big.
You're talking about like a continuity error or a story mistake?
Or just, like I've got this flow here. This is going to happen here and here and here. I want these details to be consistent with the flow and narrative of the story so far and what I've had before.
Yeah.
And I want to do and if I want to do something new, it won't throw a wrench into things, pun intended.
Well, with the first book, I just wrote it one chapter at a time. It didn't really have a major arc to it, but I found one sort of happening on its own. And I went with that, and it worked out really well. With the second one, I just wanted to tell a single story in like a 2-hour film format. But the way that I've answered that question on other projects is just to take copious notes as ideas come to me. And then at some point, I'll decide, okay, I've got enough notes. I'm going to start organizing them. And then as you organize your story notes, you begin to put them in order. This has got to happen before that can happen. Or this is obviously an earlier version of the character, and this is a later version of the character. So that helps you determine an order of events. And then you kind of build a skeleton out of that. And that allows you to see what pieces are still missing. I don't have a bone that connects the hand to the elbow yet. So I've got to figure out what that bone looks like. And then you start piling meat on the bones. And then you slowly build it up over time. That's, for example, how I wrote the Star Blazers fan comics on OurStarBlazers.com. And it's how I wrote Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh.com. And it's also how I'm working on my next story. And it really does seem like the safest way to proceed and prevents you from making those errors because you've got all those notes, supporting each other from end to end. Then it just becomes a matter of remembering that you've got those notes and not overlooking something.
Have you ever had any fan input in that regard? Where they ask you a question, you manage to be like, yeah, all right, I can answer this real quick. It's this, and this,
Not sure what you mean. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing right here, now,
sorry.
Isn't it?
Without needing to do a podcast and talking about the series overall, I mean, just
fan letters or whatever.
The only time I ever really got fan mail was when I was doing my first Star Blazers comic. And that was great. Every time I put out a chapter, and they came 60 days apart, so there was plenty of time for people to read and respond, I'd get maybe a dozen emails. And it was terrific putting another piece of the puzzle out there and then watching the emails come in with speculation about, ooh, where's this going to go? That's the kind of interaction that I always dreamed of having. But because I was usually working way ahead of deadline on my paper comics, by the time the first issue came out, I was so deep into the rest of the story that fan interaction really didn't play a role.
Okay. Yeah, all right. That checks out. All right, Prince, you wanna take it from here with anything?
I'm curious about how you went about designing all the ships and all that, because that obviously could not have been something easy to do. What was your thought process behind everything, really, I guess?
Well, there was a point back in the 80s when I had collected massive piles of Japanese books and magazines that based on, different anime and hobby magazines, and they just had tons of illustrations in them that were fascinating to look at, mecha design and that sort of thing. So there was a point where I just started going through all of these books and magazines, page by page, and sketching everything that appealed to me. There's a really cool idea for a gun. I'll sketch that. There's a cool robot head. I'll put that one down. Here's a cool spaceship engine. I'll put that down. And so I created this sort of database of sketch work that I then would go back to and reference when I had to design something. And it wasn't a matter of copying something that somebody else did and, taking it for myself, but figuring out the mindset of what it took to draw this stuff. It's the same mindset that you develop when you do a lot of life drawing, where you draw one body after another and then another and another and another. And eventually you kind of get in your head the mechanics of a human body so that you can draw any body from any angle. And you just develop a sense of how to draw human anatomy. And that's the same process I went through with this exercise. But the end goal was to figure out how to draw mecha using the same mindset as Japanese artists who I really liked. And so I've been kind of drawing from that body of work ever since. It's been years since I actually went back and looked at those sketches, but every time I sit down to design a spaceship or a fighter craft or a handgun or whatever, I've got that kind of as a body of knowledge to draw from. And it was a really helpful way to go about it. It helped me avoid the kind of clumsy nuts and bolts thing that comic book artists were doing back in the 70s and 80s. Well, if you look at cars and spaceships and robots that were drawn by comic book artists back then, they were obviously designed on the spot because you couldn't really rotate them and have them be consistent. And to be fair, comic book artists back then weren't really being paid to design stuff. That was seldom a part of their process. You'd get a script, and if there was a spaceship in it, you just drew it on the spot. You just invented one on the fly because you didn't have time and nobody was paying you to sit there and design a ship that could be drawn from different angles. You just slap something down, and then the next time you had to draw it, you do it from a different angle and kind of make it match, but it didn't matter if it wasn't precise. And that's what I wanted to avoid because it always bugged me as a kid when I saw a spaceship that looked like one thing on page 5 and then looked like a different thing on page 9. I wanted to put more craftsmanship into it than that.
Okay, so we're gonna. This is the part where I have to bring up Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. Okay, so when you design the ships for Pittsburgh, give me a rough, just ballpark the process real quick because this is relevant to what we're gonna get into for Grease Monkey ships.
Okay. Well, Pittsburgh was meant to be a hard science fiction story from the get-go, and I wanted everything in it to look like it could be built today or in the near future. So it all had to be based on solid science that we have with us now. When we look at the next generation of Earth-based or Earth-built spaceships that are going to go to the moon or to Mars, they're still kind of formed around cylinders and the tin can shape, and you have to have a certain amount of living space, and it's going to be very cramped. So you don't have a lot of big blocks to pressurize because pressurization is hard and expensive. And so all of my design sensibilities came from real life in that particular story. Grease Monkey is a much farther future thing where alien technology has come into play, so the rules are different there.
You can just like SDF1 the whole situation right there. It's kind of fast and loose, but on that in that respect though, you ever think about how there's three things I want to play around with here. It's the first one obviously is if you'd use the kind of design approach, or if you have you ever started messing with 3D models of ships for stuff for Grease Monkey ships when you get back to the story and make new designs?
I actually built one of the fighters in Maya many years ago, probably about 20 years ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it was very educational, but I haven't touched Maya since then because I just haven't had a purpose to. Now we have much more accessible programs like SketchUp.
Blender,
yeah.
One.
So in order to make Pittsburgh a little easier to draw, I got a friend of mine to build all of my ships in SketchUp for Pittsburgh.
Well, the second thing I wanted you to play around with is, what do you, if you wanted to go ahead for like a fun little experiment, kind of redesign the ships with hard science in mind, what kind of changes do you think that would have on the way you would have approached that story?
The fighter craft would look very, very different because they're not... if you're going to go the hard science route to design a space fighter, it's not going to look anything like an X-Wing or a Viper or, what we consider to be a space fighter in terms of modern sci-fi, because the energy demands are going to be much different in real life, and your ability to maneuver quickly is going to be very compromised because of the speeds you're traveling, and you're not going to have visible lasers. You're probably not even going to have barrel-shaped weapons. You're going to have, heat emission hardware, because the only real way to take out another spaceship is to overheat it. And laser beams can do that to a certain degree, but they're not going to be anything like the laser beams we have now in sci-fi, which look like flying, glowing plasma or energy. The way that you're going to have to use a laser to knock out a spaceship is to lock onto it and just continually transmit heat into that other body until you overwhelm its ability to cool itself. And so you're not going to be doing tight turns. You're not going to be flipping over. You're not going to be trying to outrace anybody. It's all going to be a matter of targeting and staying locked. And so that's going to require a completely different spaceship design from the fighter craft that I did. I just wanted them to look cool.
Fair.
That really is the most important thing.
Yeah.
So,
and if you're far enough in the future that you have alien technology to mollify all of those issues I just described, then you can do just about anything you want.
In that respect, it puts the where did you start getting the ideas for like the alien crafts that show up in the way they move in the pilot? Where they basically start doing like hard turns at like impossible angles. Where did you start getting the idea for the way that sort of ship would move, or like what a creature like that would be like?
Well, it had to be kind of the opposite from the Earth-based fighters in terms of its design. So instead of spindly wings, it's just a big glob. It's like a bullet shape. And in order to make it more maneuverable, it had to have a pilot that could withstand very hard gravity shifts. And so the pilot body, the alien body flying that, had to be very different from a human body. And so it's a creature made of silicon, which is, widely considered to be the next best thing to carbon in terms of a chemical that could support life, an element that could be manipulated by life. And so I came up with this rock look where they have this exoskeleton and their insides are kind of liquidy. And a creature like that could survive stresses that a human body could not. And so that allows them to have a different kind of ship.
Was the idea for it to come across like they modified themselves to get to that point, or that they're just built like that?
They have been modified. by the same aliens that evolved Earth gorillas to have intelligence.
All right. Well, when you
So you could consider them like a future evolutionary version of a hard-skinned reptile, like a turtle.
All right. So you know how
Wait, before we go any further, just want to make it clear we're 1 hour in.
okay.
Just saying it there.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So you know how the Zentratis have like an alphabet, right? Like they're to an extent you can kind of decipher the weird stuff going on in Macross.
Yeah, I first ran into that alphabet in a model kit.
Nice.
Really?
Yeah. Back in the very early Macross days, I bought these little mini kits of Valkyries and stuff. And they came with inserts, and one of those inserts had a Zentradi alphabet on it and a little thing you could translate with it. And
so did you go back and like read some of the stuff that was written or whatever just to see if it meant anything?
Well, I can't remember if it was based on the English alphabet or it came out into like phonetic Japanese. I think that was it.
Like Romanji?
Yeah.
I mean, no, not Romanji. What is it? You know, it's Romanji. I'm getting my mixed ups.
Yeah, well, it was just phonetic Japanese. I'm pretty sure that's how it came out because I couldn't understand what it was translating to. I just realized, oh, those are Japanese words spelled out in English letters.
So, what I was gonna ask was, at any point did you think to play with the idea of making a language for the enemy aliens faction that would show up, and for.
Well, they do have a language because you see one or two of them speak.
Yeah.
In a panel.
What I meant was,
well, there was no attempt to make that translatable.
Okay.
Just chicken scratch.
Yeah, because if you create a language that's just based on English, you might as well make it English.
Oh, is that your logic to it? Yeah. Okay. May I ask why you feel that way personally?
Well, because if you create a language like they did in Votoms, which was based on English letters, then what they put up on screen is essentially English. If you are dealing with an alien species, truly alien, that will have had no exposure to any Earth-based language, they're going to have completely different syntax and sentence structure. They may speak thoughts in a whole different order than us. I would recommend watching the movie Arrival if you want to get a good taste of what that would be like. Because that was all about decoding an alien language.
Now, speaking of aliens, without getting too much of what happens with Book 1, when it comes to that background. Now, putting anime aside for your influences, specifically with the alien benefactors that go ahead help Earth out after that whole fiasco that they talk about in the story, were there any particular kinds of societies or civilizations, either from fiction, non-fiction, that helped kind of inform a sort of idea for how you would put them in the story, how they'd be dealt with as it went along, something like that? Because when I came to the point where I wanted to pitch this for animation, I had to build it up beyond what was in the first few comic chapters. Okay. And so I thought, what would be the next phase of the story? And that would be where they have to meet up with other victims of this alien horde. So for some quick backstory, the big idea is that there's this massive alien horde that's just sweeping circles around our galaxy and laying waste to any populated planet they find. And in the wake of this, there's a group of benevolent aliens that comes along and helps lift you up after you've gone through this attack. They don't try to prevent it. They just do what they can to elevate you afterward. And then
they create these spacefaring species and from different planets whose goal is to build up enough numbers to stop what's happening. And so the logical next phase of the story would be for the Earth flagship to meet up with flagships from other planets and then start mixing with other races. And so the next phase of the comic will follow suit. I developed all these different alien species that would mix together in a cartoon, but of course we never got to do the cartoon. So I've been building toward that ever since. And you see just a brief hint of it at the end of book 2.
Now,
yeah.
So,
but to answer your specific question, I don't think there was a certain like species or a certain presentation from an anime show that directly influenced me on that.
Or even anything else beyond that, like a novel or anything.
Since the story was published, I've been informed of the Uplift series of science fiction novels. I still haven't read them, but they follow a similar idea where species are uplifted. They're given intelligence, and I'm not sure what happens after that because I haven't read that.
Oh, thank goodness, because I thought you were... I was hoping in the case of the story it wouldn't turn out, that they were pulling a Childhood's End, something like really, really malicious.
Sorry, I just came back. What'd I miss?
Nothing much. It's just, I was just hoping that, if they ever encounter them again, as I go through the story, there isn't like oh, by the way, we're building up to this, and then they show it, and it's like, oh, that's terrifying. Why would you? Oh, that's the worst.
Well, there is kind of a parallel to Childhood's End in that these benefactor aliens are very mysterious and godlike. Mm-hmm. And for them to actually appear before you in person has some very big implications. And so when that happens in book 2, it's a huge deal. It's like, here comes management. Here comes upper management. Everybody get your shit together.
It's funny you mentioned that because I'm just imagining since it's Grease Monkey, I'm just imagining a more comical version of that one part in Childhood's End where he tries to sneak aboard the Overlord ship, but it's Mac and it goes about as badly as it usually would, and it's just a beautiful mess. Because I remember this is someone who, in the happenstance of just trying to like hang out in space so he can enjoy the beauty of it and ponder life, ends up almost assuredly dying in the most horrible way possible in the next like 5 seconds. So I could.
That's right.
See, for some reason now I'm thinking of Mac doing the fucking Vince McMahon walk.
Oh, the gorilla walk? Yeah, put that in chat real quick so that just in case.
Yes.
So
sir.
When it comes to like that aspect, that seriousness, again, when it comes to the horrors of space, it doesn't, you never wanted it to be like as intense as something like Pittsburgh, right? Where like you just get kind of swallowed up by the void if you're not too careful.
Well, it's always right there, isn't it?
Yeah, you got a point.
One of the things about being on board a spaceship is, and at any given time, you are
there it is.
There's Vince McMahon. At any given time, you are inches away from certain death. And, today, our astronauts and cosmonauts are conscious of that all the time. Tomorrow, when this is all much more achievable, you won't be in as much danger. But still, all it takes is one wrong move. So you've got to be wary.
There's a certain kind of like gutsy confidence when I feel it in Grease Monkey, and that's not even because of the like advanced technology helping them through, but there's like a certain vibe or vigor where it's like, yeah, all right, I could die if I so much as like make like one small little mistake here and get everyone sucked into the void of space. But at the same time, I'm no bitch. I can't help but appreciate that, like, what is it? It's not like you're ignoring the dangers, especially for a story like Grease Monkey, where they have absolutely no idea what could happen when they go out to actually meet this threat. But it's a weird kind of like, yeah, but I could run away, but I won't.
Well, you're always going to be challenged with survival at some level. In Grease Monkey, the challenge doesn't come from the fact that your technology might fail you at any given moment. So their concerns are different from the characters in Pittsburgh, who are still dealing with the fact that they're locked up in these little tin cans with very limited resources.
It's I will say though, much like they both still do that thing at the end of the day where again it feels like they, once they've gotten past that initial like, all right, cool, that scared me, that's neat, but I don't care, I'm going ahead. That I kind of appreciate. It reminds me of actually no, yeah, it's just good. It's that's what I appreciate in space fiction, when it like acknowledges that kind of like intense like dread, that horror. Mm-hmm. I see that in Planetes, which you've mentioned in your article on it, that also had had an influence on your work, specifically Pittsburgh. But I wanted to ask if, you know, when it comes to hard science fiction, do you feel like, no, sorry, when it comes to science fiction in general, when you make your work, do you always, this is going to be connected to something you made, to an article you made on Giant Gorg, where you mentioned your love of the work of Yasuhiko Yoshikazu, where you feel like, I think you said something along the lines of, I feel like I'm doing my best to catch up.
On a good day, I can kind of draw like him.
Do you feel like you're that way with regards to science fiction, with like other stuff you look up to or you look at and you're like, or do you feel like there comes a point where you can acknowledge it and say, no, I think I can look at my stuff and say with pride that it's worthwhile. It's something I can say is art.
Well, I've never really set out to make a copy of something else. And this goes back to what I was saying about comics in the 90s, where it became really obvious to me that that most of the popular artists were only bringing to the table the comic books that they had read. And that was their frame of reference, and they couldn't really push themselves beyond that. I never wanted to be limited by something that influenced me. I wanted it to play a part in suggesting to me the kind of stories that I could write, rather than me trying to write something that another author would do. Like, my favorite science fiction author is Arthur C. Clarke. Yeah. Because he can find great, amazing things to do with very limited scenarios. You know, it seems like most of his stories, or at least the ones that I like the most, they start with the limitations of science, but then find completely different ways to exploit it for benefit. And he keeps finding, well, he's not with us anymore, so I can't use present tense, but when you go through his stories, he keeps finding all these new pathways and all these new options. And I really admire his ability to continually imagine how to get out of certain circumstances that would otherwise crush you. And the movie version of that, I think, that I could point to would be The Martian or Gravity. Those feel like Arthur C. Clarke stories to me, even though they're obviously not.
No, yeah, I get what you're saying. As granted, I've only ever read, I've read a very small amount of Arthur C. Clarke. I've only finished Childhood's End, and I've dabbled it here and there. But when I look back at it, thinking back on it now, it clicks. It's not unreasonable.
Yeah. So when I set out to write Pittsburgh, for example, and wanted it to be a hard science fiction story, my next thought was like something Arthur Clarke might have done. But obviously it's going to be different because I bring other things to the table besides my admiration for Arthur Clarke, because I've seen Planetus and I've seen other stories, whether they're in comics or film or on paper, that are obviously going to have some role to play. And then another really important part of Pittsburgh was that it's informed by today's political climate.
Yeah, that much is pretty obvious. You made it. How old is it now? Like a couple of years.
I started writing it in 2015.
Okay, and you finished it in 2017, 16?
2020.
Go back. Oh, 2020. Oh yes, it's only been a year.
Yeah.
Since it's
That's right.
Okay.
Time flies.
Well,
and when you're in hell world.
That's a way to put it. So when you make things and you finish, when you take influence from things, how important do you feel it is to get out of your comfort zone? You personally, I don't want any rhetoric. So I didn't want to create any rhetoric, but you personally speaking, like with when you enjoy something new and you're like, oh, this is giving me some new ideas I didn't expect of all things.
I don't know how everybody else does it, but the way I do it is if some really wacky idea comes tumbling in from who knows where, I still write it down rather than rejecting it out of hand.
Okay, could you give an example?
Could be something. Yes, that example would be the side story for Pittsburgh. There was a point where the story was just going to be the main characters in space trying to work out their problems. But then I got this other idea for a superhero comic.
Okay.
With five different superheroes, all based on who would have elemental powers, fire,
would this
air,
be,
water,
I'm shot in the dark here, but am I detecting some Sentai-ness?
I didn't have that in mind, but I'm not going to say that it didn't influence me in some way.
Do you have any familiarity with Sentai?
It's part of the stew.
Okay.
Very little. The only Sentai show that I have seen from start to finish is Spider-Man.
Wait, wow, okay, I guess that counts. Hell, without it,
and how timely too.
Without it, you don't get the mechs for starting from Battle Fever J. So you're onto something.
Yeah. So out of the blue, as I'm working on the main story of Pittsburgh, I get this idea for this weird superhero series where the whole point of it is that one character dies in every chapter.
Yeah.
And just playing it for the drama of that. And it had nothing to do with Pittsburgh at that point. I was thinking, okay, maybe that's the next thing I do. But it just kept digging at me. It just kept, grabbing my attention and saying, make me.
All right.
And then when I started to think of maybe combining the two, a whole new set of ideas opened up. And suddenly it was a much bigger and much more broad story than I originally thought it could be. So, it was a completely out there idea that suddenly became so vital to the story that there was no way to separate the two again.
All right.
And so that's how you get outside your comfort zone. Something that seems completely bonkers could end up being one of the most important elements of what you're trying to do.
Well, fucking A. That was an interesting... like, I, myself, while Pittsburgh may not be my favorite work of yours personally, still got stuff there that I can say, yeah, all right, that's pretty good. So, even then, I can't knock you for that. Look, since I saw what the results brought me at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So, good. Yeah, all right. So with regards to that, what are you currently enjoying right now? That's a piece of media, what have you.
Yeah, what's your tastes?
Well, I watch anime every day.
Okay, yeah, fair. Same.
There was a
It's
point.
the pastime.
Well, there was a point about three and a half years ago where I looked at my shelves and said, I haven't watched like 60% of what's sitting on my shelf. I remember being excited about it and buying it and saying, oh, I can't wait to watch this. And then it went up on the damn shelf and never got touched. So around the end of 2018, I decided, okay, start pulling stuff off the shelves. Just grab the first thing you see, put it on, start watching it, make it a daily thing. And it's coming up on 3 full years of this, where I've been watching anime every day. And I've absorbed close to 100 shows in that time.
All right.
And various movies and things too.
I feel you.
Currently, I'm kind of in Monkey Punch world.
Nice!
Hell yeah, that's one of our faves.
Yeah, I finally am watching a woman named
Fujiko Mine?
Fujiko Mine.
Okay, yeah, all right.
I'm almost at the end of it. I've got only 2 episodes left.
Okay.
And that's my evening show. My lunchtime show is Monkatsu.
Oh.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I'm aware. It's that's the anthology series for Monkey Punch's work, right?
Yeah, it's 12-hour-long episodes of just Monkey Punch stories of various different shades and quality.
Okay.
It's not great, but it's always fun.
Yeah.
So where do you sneak in that one opening from a Jackie Chan movie where they actually had some Monkey Punch animation done for?
Oh, I'm not aware of this.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I think Toei in the 80s distributed some random Jackie Chan film, and they got Monkey Punch to do some designs for them, and they made a little animated short out of it.
Oh, that's cool.
Don't be that surprised. Okay. Well, in that regard... I was going to ask, how are you liking Takeshi Koike's designs in A Woman Named Fujiko Mine?
Oh, it's incredible.
Okay, all right.
It's such a breath of fresh air.
How far in are you?
I'm at the last 2 episodes.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
What I like the most about it is that it put all the edges back on those characters after like a decade or more of TV specials that got increasingly samey, and they sort of defanged Lupin. Kind of where he didn't really seem dangerous anymore. He was, they kept kind of putting him in the Miyazaki mode. They wanted to evoke Cagliostro and keep him, a nice guy with a heart. Whereas the original Lupin was not like that at all. He was a bastard. He was.
Admittedly, some aspects of that I'm fine that they kind of ditched.
Well, the manga is problematic, but I'm talking about his first TV series.
Well, I mean, I'm a Green Jacket man all the way, but especially
since that was what was airing on Adult Swim for a while back.
Especially the first half of Green Jacket, where Yasuo Otsuka was the director. I'm a huge fan of his work. I've been trying to snag art books of his stuff as much as I possibly can. That is someone who I can definitely say I try my best to keep up with, which is unfortunately he passed away this year. I always had some like wild fantasy of meeting him myself someday. But he was what pushed me to want to do more things with art in terms of mechanical detail, because he would just do things especially in Green Jacket, with like watches, timers, speedometers, gears, wheels, all sorts of things, what have you, that just really got me going in a way that I haven't had with anything else since.
Yeah, that's because as a kid he was fascinated with machinery and he would sketch it constantly. He would just sit there and sketch a car or a Jeep or a train, and he just got this insatiable desire to draw everything in front of him. And that's the knowledge base that he brought to Lupin. And
I appreciate that. I think he said it's why he wanted to even do that show to begin with, right? So he could get the chance to like mess around with that kind of animation, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's a kind of similar to what I was telling you about with my own experience going through all those books and magazines and just, building up that library of sketches to train my mind to think that way. So he did the same thing with real life objects back when he was a kid. And, they didn't have TV. He brought the whole world into his sketchbook, and then it ended up in his head, and it came out on TV, in the cartoons that he directed.
Well, Prince, what have you been getting into that's been greasing your creative gears?
Well, other than reading, quote unquote, reading Sea Tiger for the millionth time, okay. I've actually just been kind of watching just about whatever. Right. Nothing really in particular. What was the last thing I was actually watching? Oh, I was watching Hit Monkey on Hulu. Oh? I'm fine with if so Marvel's doing this thing where they're giving a lot of their like C and D list characters their own shows like MODOK.
Okay.
And I'm all about that now. Like if they can take more of their random just back catalog of 1,000 bajillion zillion million squillion characters and just make random shows off of them, I'd be fine with that. Right. I've also been watching a bit of Bottom again. Okay. I would watch the episode where they were running this store.
That's my favorite episode.
And Rick's just running. You want some of this? Eh? Do you old git? The old lady. Tim, do you know anything about British comedy, specifically from the 80s, featuring guys from the Young Ones?
You want me to say Young Ones, don't you?
Yes, please. Oh God, I've been waiting for this.
Yeah, I love that show. That was one of those things that I taped off of MTV and just played the tape endlessly while I was drawing.
Yeah.
Like a couple times a year, I'd just run all the Young Ones episodes like in the background while I was working.
Nice.
Admittedly, I am more into Bottom. Do you know about Bottom? That's the other one.
No, is it a spinoff of some kind?
Okay, so Bottom is about Rick Mayo and Ade Edmondson playing Richie and Eddie Hitler, who are basically these two just absolute scumbags living in poverty, just getting into all sorts of like almost live action cartoonish slapstick violence. Like they're smashing TVs on each other, zapping each other with electricity. Sort of like I guess it's just like a live action cartoon with as cartoony as it can get. But it was a few years after Young Ones and after they did that one in between show. I think it was called Filthy Rich and Cat Flap.
I feel like good. I've seen some of what you're talking about, but
let me just post one of my favorite bits. Yeah. I'll link it. But it's a good show. It's all on Amazon, actually, if you have that.
I can also recommend Peep Show. Do you guys?
Yeah. Oh, no! Oh, my God, not this again.
Actually, we were really into Peep Show.
No, you were really into Peep Show. It's like that fucking scene in Godfather. Every time I try to get out of the game, they keep pulling me back in.
Yeah, I love that. Fucking the one bit that always stays with me is Super Hands and the fucking old people like, nah, we gotta have a wash machine in here. That's how we know we're cool. That's how we know we're not like those fancy ones with the foams in them mugs.
I want to see that cast do a new version of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, that would be interesting. But
they line up just right.
Aside from that, there is actually no, I don't think I'm very much. No, I don't think I'm as deep into British comedy, but I do end up reenacting the Christmas turkey joke with Prince unintentionally, where he'll take what I say as complete sincerity and just commit to it, and then I go, yeah, actually, and then I do my equivalent of opening up the fridge, and he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
Yeah, in wrestling terms, I shoot on him pretty hard.
Out of context, it's going to sound horrible. All right.
Okay, so to quickly explain it. Okay, I'll wait for this car to pass.
Well, I think he's gone now.
Okay, so in wrestling, there's two terms you really gotta know: work and shoot. Work is where you're following the script, you're working with each other. But when you're shooting, you're going off script. You're shooting, you're shooting off, you're going off script, basically. You're going in for business yourself. So whenever I do something like what 8 described, that's what we call a shoot.
Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's a little too comical at my expense. Like someone's watching me and deciding to have a little go.
We've had a friend of ours, I think it was Melly, right, who said we're kind of like a Japanese stand-up duo or whatever that's called, a manzai.
I don't like how accurate that description is. Sometimes I like to forget it, and then it rears its ugly head again. So yeah, but actually, do you have any? Have you ever spent any time watching Red Dwarf? I was gonna say, and on top of things you enjoy.
Oh yes, yeah, Red Dwarf. Anything about that?
For me, no. I've seen maybe one episode
and
never went back to it.
I didn't like it, so I moved on.
Red Dwarf is one of those things I meant to get into a long ass time ago, especially since a friend of ours actually linked me to an archive.org listing that has all the episodes. But it's something I just never get to because I'm a lazy sod.
I'm having the opposite thing where like things are pulling me.
Although I did watch the first few episodes where it's just the guy on the ship and the hologram of whatever his name was. I don't remember the names at all. I'm bad with names. And I thought, yeah, I do need to watch more of this. But then I didn't. And
it'd be like that. So I was going to say, so to round off something I've currently been into, I myself...
Oh, BT Dubs. We got 30 minutes left if we're still doing 2 hours.
Right, that's no problem at all. I was going to say, I've also been getting into... Oh, my voice cracked. Oh, nice.
Hey, don't do my bit.
I was going to say...
I'm actually coming up on dinner time, so I'd like to wrap it up pretty soon.
Okay, then. In that case, I'll finish it up with saying I've also been getting into jumping back onto Lupin, finishing up part 6, or, what's currently out right now. It's good stuff. It reminds me of why I got back into it. Makes me want to go and read Maurice LeBlanc's novels and Sir Arthur Conan's Sherlock Holmes series in full. It's having a pretty positive effect on the way I look at things with regards to writing. I'm also slowly but surely finishing up some Sentai shows like Mega Ranger. It's good stuff. I appreciate the upbeat energy they keep with it, regardless of whatever happens. It's got a good flow to it. That's about it for me. Well, I think
again, if we let's see, we only got 30 minutes left, and Tim's got to bounce soon. No. Should we just what?
Let's just give our closing thoughts.
Yeah. So, anyways, I love Grease Monkey. I gotta do more reading on it. I swear to John. I need to figure out a way to go back in time to buy some issues day one, so that way you have a little more pocket money for yourself.
It's not about the pocket money anymore. It's about just getting a chance to create something that I like, put it out in the world, and have it make some friends. And if it comes back to me in some way, that's great. If it doesn't, then I'll be already moved on to the next thing.
Amen. Good philosophy.
All right, then. Who are we?
I was Eric McIrons. That was 8StarKaijin. And once again, thank you, Mr. Tim Eldred, for giving us your time.
You're welcome, little buddy. Good luck with that dishwashing job.
I didn't get it.
Oh. Well, good luck with the next one.
I didn't. I don't know yet. Shit, but I probably wouldn't. I ruined the ending.
No, it's okay.
I ruined it. I fucked the turkey.
Okay. Look.
But anyways, thank you once again. And thank you, hopeful listener, for listening to this podcast. We'll see you next time with no special guest because I just want it to be me, 8, and another friend of ours talking about bullshit.
Sweet. Sounds good. All right. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you.
And get your ass boosted.
Yes. You know what? Yeah. Wear your mask. Get boosted if you can. Oh, let's not gonna talk. Wear your masks. No, shut your mouth. Hush, little bitch. Remember, wear your masks. Get your shots. Get a booster if you can, and make sure to do that 6 feet away from people shit. And also, hand sanitize and wash them when you can.
As a man who went to New York Anime Con, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, thank God nothing popped. I'm so happy. All right, good night, folks.
So long.